The energy field hummed with malevolent blue light, casting everything in Kalira's cell in cold, sterile shadows. She sat cross-legged on the narrow metal bench that served as both chair and bed, her pale green skin almost luminescent under the harsh prison lighting. Her red hair, once vibrant and wild, now hung in matted waves around her shoulders, the only splash of warmth in this frozen hell they called Nexus Station. 3 months, 97 standard days since they'd dragged her from the refugee processing center on Kepler 442b and thrown her into this maximum security orbital prison. 3 months of silence, broken only by the mechanical drone of life support systems and the occasional bark of guards who looked at her like she was some kind of predatory animal. Freak, one of them had whispered just yesterday, thinking she couldn't hear. But the Threnai possessed exceptional hearing along with the psychic abilities that made everyone so terrified of her. They should have spaced her the moment she arrived. The worst part wasn't the isolation or the fear in everyone's eyes. It was the complete absence of hope. No trial date, no charges formally read, no legal representation. She existed in a legal void, labeled as a Category 5 psychic threat, and forgotten by a system that had already decided her fate. Kalira closed her eyes and tried to remember the forests of her homeworld, Threnara, before the war came. The silver-barked trees that sang in harmonies only her people could hear. The crystal lakes that reflected not just light, but emotions themselves. All of it gone now, reduced to ash and radioactive dust by forces she still didn't fully understand. The sound of magnetic locks disengaging made her look up. Through the translucent energy barrier, she watched a human approach. Not one of the usual guards in their black tactical gear, but a maintenance worker in gray coveralls. He was young, maybe 30 standard years, with short brown hair and kind eyes that held none of the fear or hatred she'd grown accustomed to. Officer Jace Corwin, according to his name tag. She'd seen him before during his rounds, checking atmospheric processors and running diagnostics on the cell block's systems. Unlike the others, he never stared, never whispered. He simply did his work with quiet efficiency and moved on. Today felt different. As he knelt beside the environmental controls near her cell, adjusting something with a handheld scanner, she caught him glancing at her. Not with fear or curiosity, but with something that made her breath catch in her throat. Concern. Temperature. Regulation's been running cold in this section, he said quietly, his voice barely audible above the station's ambient noise. He wasn't speaking to the guards, they were at the other end of the block playing cards and sharing crude jokes. He was speaking to her. Kalira's throat felt dry. She couldn't remember the last time someone had addressed her directly, as a person rather than a threat to be contained. Should be warmer in here within the hour. Jace continued, making minute adjustments to his equipment. The heating elements were calibrated wrong. Someone should have caught that weeks ago. She wanted to respond, to thank him for this simple act of consideration, but the words wouldn't come. 3 months of silence had stolen her voice, leaving her feeling more alien than her green skin and psychic abilities ever had. Jace finished his work and stood, slinging his tool bag over his shoulder. For a moment, their eyes met through the energy barrier. In his gaze, she saw something she'd almost forgotten existed: basic human decency. "Everyone deserves to be comfortable," he said softly, "regardless of who they are or where they come from." Then he was gone, leaving Kalira alone with the slowly warming air and the first spark of something she hadn't felt since her imprisonment began. Not hope, not yet, but the faintest possibility that she hadn't been completely forgotten by the universe. As the temperature in her cell rose to a more tolerable level, she wrapped her arms around her knees and allowed herself to remember what it felt like to be treated like a living being, rather than a specimen in a cage. Outside her cell, the prison station continued its slow orbit around the dead moon Keros 9, carrying its cargo of the lost and forgotten through the endless void. But for the first time in months, Kalira didn't feel quite so alone in the darkness. The days that followed blurred together in a haze of unexpected kindness. Jace returned to her section more frequently than his duties strictly required, always finding some technical issue that needed attention. A faulty atmospheric sensor here, a malfunctioning gravity regulator there. Each time he brought small gifts disguised as routine maintenance. Food synthesizers been producing substandard nutrition blocks, he mentioned during one visit, discreetly sliding a package of real, dried fruit through the meal slot. This should help supplement your intake. Kalira caught the package with trembling fingers, her pale green skin flushing darker with emotion. The sweet taste of actual fruit brought tears to her eyes, the first she'd shed since arriving at Nexus Station. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible after months of disuse. Jace paused in his work, his scanner forgotten in his hands. "You can speak." She nodded, suddenly self-conscious. No one has given me reason to." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of anger that wasn't directed at her. "How long have you been here?" 3 months, 17 days. The precision came automatically. She'd been counting every hour, and no trial, no hearing. Kalira shook her head, studying his face through the energy barrier. Most humans looked at her with fear or disgust, but Jace's eyes held only growing outrage at the injustice of her situation. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Kalira Vostani." She pronounced it slowly, the musical syllables of her native tongue feeling strange after so long speaking only Galactic Standard. "I'm Jace." He smiled, and she felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "It's good to meet you, Kalira." Over the following weeks, their conversations grew longer and more intimate. Jace would linger after completing his maintenance tasks, and, Kalira found herself looking forward to his visits with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. "Tell me about your world," he said one evening, settling against the wall across from her cell as if they were old friends sharing stories. Kalira closed her eyes, letting the memories wash over her. "Thrinara was beautiful. We lived in harmony. With our forests, our cities grown rather than built. The trees themselves were alive, conscious in ways your people might not understand. Is that where your abilities come from? The psychic talents?" She nodded, then realized he might not be able to see the gesture clearly. "We're empathic by nature. We feel what others feel, see echoes of their thoughts and emotions. It's how we communicated with our world, with each other." "That must make this place unbearable," Jace said quietly. "The isolation is worse than the fear," she admitted. "I can sense the guards' hatred, the other prisoners' terror. It's like being surrounded by a constant storm of negative emotion. What do you sense from me?" The question hung between them, loaded with meaning. Kalira opened her psychic senses, something she rarely did anymore, and reached out toward him. What she found made her breath catch. Warmth, genuine care. And underneath it all, a growing attraction that mirrored her own feelings. "You're not afraid of me," she whispered. "Should I be?" "Everyone else is." Jace leaned forward, his eyes intense. "You're not dangerous, are you? You're just someone who got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I was fleeing the war. My family, my entire clan. They're all dead. I was alone, scared, barely 17 standard years old when I reached the refugee processing station. The officials took one look at my species classification and decided I was too dangerous to process normally." 17? Jace's voice was sharp with shock. "You were just a child. I'm 20 now. I've spent my entire adult life in this cage." The silence stretched between them, heavy with shared emotion. When Jace finally spoke, his voice was thick with barely contained fury. "This is wrong. What they've done to you, it's criminal." "But I'm the one in prison," Kalira said with bitter irony. "Not for much longer." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. "What do you mean?" Jace glanced around, ensuring they were still alone, then moved closer to the energy barrier. "I've been thinking about what you told me, about having no charges, no trial. I have access to the prison's legal database. Would you mind if I looked into your case?" The offer was dangerous for both of them. Accessing prisoner files without authorization was a serious offense, one that could cost Jace his job or worse. "You'd do that for me?" "Kalira," he said softly, and the way he spoke her name sent shivers through her. What's happening to you is an injustice. If there's a way to make it right, don't you think we should try? She pressed her palm against the energy barrier, wishing she could touch him properly. You barely know me. Jace placed his own hand opposite hers, separated by the crackling field. I know enough. I know you're kind, intelligent, and brave. I know you've suffered more than anyone should have to endure, and I know. He trailed off, but she could sense the completion of his thought through her empathic abilities. The realization hit her like a physical blow. He was falling in love with her. And God help her, she was falling in love with him too. I know, she whispered, understanding passing between them without words. For a moment they simply stood there, hands almost touching through the barrier that separated them, two souls finding each other in the most impossible of circumstances. I'll find a way, Jace promised. Whatever it takes, I'll find a way to get you out of here. As he gathered his tools and prepared to leave, Kalira called out softly, Jace? He turned back. Be careful. I couldn't bear it if something happened to you because of me. His smile was gentle and determined. Nothing's going to happen to either of us. I promise. After he left, Kalira remained standing by the barrier, her palm still pressed against the spot where his hand had been. For the first time since her imprisonment, she allowed herself to hope. 2 weeks later, Jace returned with shadows under his eyes and a grim expression that made Kalira's heart race with anxiety. He'd been avoiding her section, claiming technical difficulties whenever she'd expected his visits. Now she understood why. I found your file, he said without preamble, his voice tight with barely controlled rage. Kalira sank onto her bench, suddenly afraid of what he might have discovered. And? There are no charges against you. None. You were classified as a potential psychic threat based on nothing more than your species profile and transferred here for indefinite containment pending evaluation. His hands clenched into fists. The evaluation was never conducted. There's not even a request for one in your file. The words hit her like physical blows. So I could be here forever. It gets worse. Jace began pacing the narrow corridor outside her cell, his agitation palpable through her empathic senses. I dug deeper into the refugee processing records. Your case was handled by Deputy Administrator Korath Vex. He's Centaurian. They have a historic prejudice against psychic species. I remember him, Kalira whispered. He looked at me like I was something disgusting he'd stepped in. 3 days after your transfer, Vex received a substantial payment from an unnamed Centaurian conglomerate. The same conglomerate that holds the government contract for psychic research specimens. The implications crashed over her in a wave of horror. They were going to sell me. The only thing that saved you was a bureaucratic mix-up. You were supposed to be transferred to their facility, but the paperwork got lost in the system. Vex probably assumed it had been handled and moved on to his next victim. Rage and grief warred within her chest. How many others? I found at least 6 similar cases in the past year. All psychic species, all refugees, all disappeared into the system. Jace stopped pacing and faced her directly. Kalira, we have to expose this, but first we have to get you out of here. That's impossible. This is a maximum security facility. I've been studying the station's systems for 3 weeks, he said, moving closer to the barrier. I know every maintenance tunnel, every security protocol, every blind spot in the surveillance network. I can get you out. The determination in his voice both thrilled and terrified her. Jace, if you're caught, I won't be. If you're caught, she continued firmly, they'll execute you for treason. Helping a dangerous psychic escape, they'll make an example of you. He pressed his palm against the barrier across from hers, his eyes blazing with fierce protectiveness. Then we won't get caught. That night, Jace returned during the graveyard shift when most of the station slept. Kalira had been lying awake, her mind churning with plans and possibilities when she heard the soft hiss of the energy barrier deactivating. How? She began. Emergency maintenance override, he whispered, pulling her from the cell. I programmed a cascade failure in the detention block's power grid. We have maybe 20 minutes before backup systems come online. They moved through the darkened corridors like shadows, Jace leading her through a maze of service tunnels she'd never known existed. The station's night lighting cast everything in deep red, making the walls look like they were painted with blood. "There," Jace whispered, indicating a maintenance hatch. "This leads to the outer ring. From there we can reach the shuttle bay." As they crawled through the narrow tunnel, Kalira became acutely aware of Jace's proximity. His warmth, his scent, the steady rhythm of his breathing. Her empathic abilities, heightened by stress and adrenaline, picked up every nuance of his emotional state. Desire, love, desperate determination to protect her. They emerged into a small storage bay, and Jace immediately began sealing the hatch behind them. Kalira watched the play of muscles under his maintenance coveralls, the careful precision of his movements, the way his hair fell across his forehead. "Jace," she said softly. He turned, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. Raw, unguarded emotion shone in his eyes, love and fear and desperate hope all tangled together. "I almost lost you before I found you," he whispered. "You didn't lose me. You saved me." They moved toward each other as if drawn by gravity, and when their hands finally touched without the barrier between them, Kalira gasped at the electric sensation. His skin was warm and rough with calluses, real and solid and alive. "Your hands," she breathed, marveling at the simple miracle of contact. "Your skin," he replied, his fingers tracing the pale green of her cheek. "You're so beautiful." The kiss, when it came, was desperate and tender and full of months of suppressed longing. Kalira had never kissed a human before, had never kissed anyone, but instinct guided her as she pressed closer to him. "I love you," she whispered against his lips. "I love you too," he replied, his voice rough with emotion. "More than I ever thought possible." They held each other in the dim storage bay, two souls finally united, while around them the station hummed with the machinery of their impending escape. Soon they would have to move, to run, to fight for their freedom and their future. But for now they had this moment, and it was enough. The shuttle bay stretched before them like a vast cavern, dimly lit by emergency lighting strips that cast long shadows across the deck. Jace had chosen their timing perfectly. The night shift was minimal, and most of the bay's activity had ceased hours ago. "There," he whispered, pointing to a small maintenance shuttle tucked between two larger transport vessels. "The Meridian. She's not much to look at, but she's fast and her registration won't trigger immediate alerts." Kalira followed him across the deck, her bare feet silent on the cold metal. The prison uniform they'd given her was thin and inadequate, but Jace had brought her a maintenance jumpsuit that was too large but wonderfully warm. "Can you fly it?" she asked as they approached the shuttle. "I'm certified on all maintenance craft. It's part of the job." He keyed in his access code and the shuttle's airlock cycled open with a soft hiss. "But once we launch, there's no going back. They'll know it was me." Kalira caught his arm, her green fingers wrapping around his wrist. "Are you sure? You're giving up everything. Your job, your life here, your future." "For me." Jace turned to face her fully, his hands cupping her face with infinite tenderness. "Kalira, you are my future. Everything I was before I met you feels like preparation for this moment." She kissed him then, pouring all her gratitude and love and desperate hope into the contact. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "We should," Jace began. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station, red lights flashing in urgent patterns. The evening shift had discovered her empty cell. "Go, go, go." Jace pushed her into the shuttle, his fingers flying over the startup sequence. The engines hummed to life just as security teams began flooding into the bay. There, the maintenance shuttle. Energy bolts began striking the hull as Jace fired the engines and lifted off. The shuttle lurched sickeningly as they shot toward the bay doors, which were already beginning to close. "Hold on," Jace shouted over the noise of alarms and weapons fire. They scraped through the narrowing gap with centimeters to spare. "Emergency. lights and debris flying past the viewport. Then they were in open space, the stars wheeling around them as Jace put the shuttle into a spiraling, evasive pattern. Pursuit craft launching, Kalyra reported, monitoring the scanner. Her psychic abilities gave her an intuitive understanding of the display, even though she'd never seen one before. 3 interceptors. They're faster than us, Jace muttered, pushing the engines to maximum. But I know something they don't. He guided them toward the asteroid field that surrounded Ceros 9, the maintenance shuttle diving between massive tumbling rocks with heart-stopping precision. The interceptors followed, but their larger size worked against them in the tight spaces. How do you know how to do this? Kalyra asked, gripping her seat as they rolled between 2 asteroids with barely a meter of clearance. I used to run supplies to the mining operations out here, Jace replied through gritted teeth. I know every rock, every cave, every hiding spot. He proved it by diving into what looked like solid stone, only to reveal a narrow crevice that led to a hollow chamber deep inside the asteroid. The interceptors shot past, unable to follow. We did it, Kalyra breathed, hardly believing they were safe. For now. Jace began shutting down non-essential systems to reduce their energy signature. But they'll keep looking. We need to get off this ship and find somewhere to lay low. In the cramped confines of the shuttle, sitting so close, their knees touched. The adrenaline of their escape began to transform into something else. Kalyra became acutely aware of every detail, the way Jace's chest rose and fell with his breathing, the intensity in his eyes, the tremor in his hands as he reached for her. I can't believe we're free, she whispered. We're not free yet, he replied, but his voice was soft, intimate. Not until we expose what they did to you to the others. Later, she said, leaning closer. Right now, I just want to feel alive. The kiss was different this time, not desperate or hurried, but slow and thorough and full of promise. When Jace's hands found the zipper of her jumpsuit, she didn't stop him. When she helped him out of his shirt, running her fingers over his chest with wonder, he groaned her name like a prayer. Are you sure? He asked, his forehead pressed against hers. I've never been more sure of anything, she replied. They made love in the pilot's compartment of the stolen shuttle, surrounded by the vast emptiness of space, 2 souls finally united in body as well as heart. For Kalyra, it was a revelation, not just the physical pleasure, but the emotional connection her empathic abilities allowed her to share. She felt his love, his desire, his overwhelming need to protect and cherish her. Afterward, they lay entwined in the narrow space, her head on, his chest listening to the steady beat of his heart. What happens now? She asked softly. Now we disappear, Jace replied, his fingers combing through her red hair. I know people who can help, places where we can hide while we gather evidence. We're going to bring down everyone involved in this conspiracy. And then, he tilted her chin up so she could see his eyes. Then we build a life together. Whatever you want, wherever you want to go. I'm with you. Outside their asteroid hideaway, the search continued. But inside the shuttle, wrapped in each other's arms, Kalyra felt something she thought was lost forever. Hope. 6 months later, Kalyra stood at the observation deck of Haven Station, watching ships arrive and depart against the backdrop of a glowing nebula. The independent trading post, built into a hollowed-out asteroid, served as neutral ground for merchants, refugees, and others who lived on the margins of galactic society. It had become home. Any word from our contact on Centauri Prime? Jace asked, approaching with 2 cups of real coffee, a luxury they could finally afford. The investigation is proceeding, Kalyra replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. Deputy Administrator Vex has been arrested along with 3 other officials. The trafficking ring is unraveling. And the others? The prisoners like you? 17 people freed so far, with more cases under review. She leaned against him, savoring his warmth and the steady pulse of love and contentment flowing from his mind. We did it, Jace. We actually did it. Their evidence, carefully gathered over months of dangerous investigation, had finally reached the right people. The expose had triggered a galaxy-wide scandal, forcing reforms in refugee processing and prisoner rights. It hadn't been easy. They'd lived in hiding, constantly moving, always looking over their shoulders. But it had been worth it. "There's something else," Jace said, his emotional state shifting to nervous excitement. "I got word from the diplomatic corps. They're offering you a position." Kalira turned to stare at him. "What kind of position?" "Special advocate for psychic rights. You'd work with refugee populations, help others like yourself navigate the system. It would be dangerous work, but necessary," she finished. The idea thrilled and terrified her in equal measure. After so long as a victim, the chance to help others avoid her fate was almost too good to believe. "There's one condition," Jace continued. "They want both of us. They need someone with technical skills to help document conditions, gather evidence. We'd be partners in every sense." The future spread out before them like an endless starfield full of possibilities. Kalira set down her coffee and turned to face him fully. "Is that a job offer or a proposal?" Jace's grin was radiant. "Both, actually." He dropped to one knee, right there on the observation deck, pulling out a small box. "Kalira Vostani, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything?" The ring was beautiful, a green stone that matched her skin, surrounded by small diamonds that caught the nebula's light. But it was the emotion radiating from him that truly took her breath away. Pure, overwhelming love, mixed with hope and joy and absolute certainty. "Yes," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, of course, yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood to kiss her as the other residents of Haven Station burst into applause around them. Through her empathic abilities, Kalira felt their genuine happiness, their approval, their hope for the future. That night, in their small apartment overlooking the station's central plaza, they made love with a tenderness and passion that had only deepened over the months. Jace worshipped her green skin with his lips and hands, while she used her psychic connection to share every sensation, every wave of pleasure, creating a feedback loop of intimacy that left them both shaking. "I love you," she gasped as he moved. Within her, her legs wrapped around his waist. "I love you so much it terrifies me." "Don't be afraid," he whispered against her neck. "We have forever now. No more running, no more hiding, just us and the work we'll do together." Later, as they lay tangled in the sheets, Kalira traced patterns on his chest and marveled at the path her life had taken. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up your old life?" "Never," Jace replied firmly. "You saved me as much as I saved you. I was just existing before, going through the motions. You gave me purpose." "We gave each other purpose," she corrected. They talked long into the station's artificial night about their plans, their hopes, the people they would help. When they finally slept, it was with their bodies pressed close together, their hearts beating in synchrony. The next morning brought news of their first assignment, a refugee camp on the border worlds where several psychic species were being held in conditions similar to what Kalira had endured. It would be dangerous work, requiring them to go undercover, gather evidence, and orchestrate another rescue operation. "Are you ready for this?" Jace asked as they packed their few belongings. Kalira looked around their small apartment, then at the man who had become her entire world. 3 years ago, she had been a frightened refugee girl, alone and powerless. Now she was part of something larger, a movement to protect the vulnerable, to fight injustice wherever they found it. "I'm ready," she said, taking his hand. "Let's go save some people." As their ship pulled away from Haven Station, heading toward unknown dangers and new challenges, Kalira felt only excitement. She had found her purpose, her partner, her place in the galaxy. The stars stretched endlessly before them, full of people who needed help, who needed hope, who needed someone to whisper the words that had changed her life. "You don't belong here. You deserve better. You are worth saving." Together, she and Jace would make sure no one had to wait as long as she had to hear those words. And in the process, they would build a love story that spanned the galaxy, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to bring light to others lost in the void.